Good evening, beautiful woman. Welcome to Isaya's Inspiring Evenings, a podcast full of goddess series, witches' secrets, colors of women, and fairy seasons to integrate serenity, abundance, joy, and magic into your life. I am Isaya Bell, creatrix, magical pragmatic inspiration mentor, tech goddess teacher, and traveling priestess. And this podcast aims to accompany you for peaceful and inspiring evenings. Isaya's Inspiring Evenings has had various iterations and styles and is published irregularly. Subscribe to the podcast on the platform of your choice to be informed of the publication of each new episode. If you like this podcast, please support it by leaving stars, blue thumbs, and reviews on whatever platform you listen to me. In 2024, there are going to be 5 series in it, for now. All different, all aiming to inspire the audience, all telling stories, each complementing each other. One series titled Women Lighting the Way is about women's stories, centering around the past or future speakers from the various Women Lighting the Way summits, adding to the virtual library of women's stories and providing a much-needed counterpoint to the many men's stories going around in our world of patriarchy. This is one of those episodes, and I'm happy to invite you to listen to the story of Vivian Watson, recorded in 2022 and titled The Magic of the Lowest Point. Enjoy!
Hello, and welcome to my talk. My name is Vivian Watson, and it's an honor to be here. I'm an energy healer and a life and business coach for women spiritual leaders. And what I do is I help them to build their businesses from the inside out so they can change more lives and ultimately change the vibration of the planet, raise the vibration of the planet. And before I continue, something that you should know about me is that I am originally from Venezuela, but I live in Spain. I have been living in Spain for over 20 years. And up until now, I have done my coaching and all my programs in Spanish. And so I'm not very used to talking about my story in English, so please bear with me in case I, mistake some words or whatever. So anyway, my story begins on a regular afternoon about 8 years ago. I was a new mother then. My second child was just a few months old, and my eldest was 4 months old. And I was spending the afternoon with her, regular mom thing. I remember very clearly that I was breastfeeding my baby. And the doorbell rang. And when I went to open it, it was this lovely lady who had this very ugly paper on her hand. The paper was an eviction notice. When the woman handed me the paper, and I saw the grayish color, ugly, with those ugly red letters printed all over, eviction. Oh my God, my world stopped. I remember closing the door and standing there by the door, holding my baby, was breastfeeding, and with my child, my eldest, holding my skirt. And I was holding the paper in my other hand. And at that moment, many things crossed my mind. The first one was, oh my God, who does this ever? I'm a mother. I have 2 kids. What kind of irresponsible person can I be to come to this extreme situation? Receiving an eviction notice, like the roof of my kids. I mean, who does this? And I felt so irresponsible. And I felt so, so bad about myself. It was such an ugly, ugly feeling of failure, of having totally and completely failed as a mother, as a person, as a woman, as an entrepreneur, completely failed. But then another thought crossed my mind. And the second thought was, well, I was holding that ugly paper. This is not going to be my life. This is not going to happen. What I didn't know at the time is that that thought, that decision would change my life forever. Because I didn't know it at the time. I just had the thought. I just told myself, we are going to get through this. This is not happening. I made that decision on the spot. And of course, you know what happens when you make those big, important, life changing decisions? You don't get angels, a choir of angels singing at you. You don't get fireworks, you know? It's nothing happens. Right? So nothing feels out of the ordinary. Actually, the most profound breakthroughs arrive at us that way. You don't, you don't listen a marching band. You don't hear anything. It's it could be something as simple, just a tiny little thought, just a tiny little insight, tiny. That has the power to change your entire life. And that's what happened for me then. When I made that decision, what I didn't know at the time, because at the time I had no idea how all of this works. I had no idea about how energy works. I had no idea about how the law of attraction worked. I had no idea. But at the time, when I made that decision in the unseen world, everything started to prepare for a huge shift in my life. It didn't come overnight. Actually, when I made that decision, I had absolutely no idea how I was going to shift all the situation. I had absolutely no clue. And what had happened? Why did I get to that situation? Because I had been avoiding. I had been avoiding what was going on. I had been, up until that moment, like the ostrich that buries their head in the sand, not wanting to see. You see, up until that moment, my husband had been trying to talk to me about our financial situation. So I knew that something was going on, but I just didn't want to know. I didn't want to see it because I was too afraid. Why was I so afraid? I was so afraid because I was sure that I could not do anything to change the situation. That was my belief at the moment. I felt completely powerless to change the situation. So I was waiting. I was waiting for it to change on its own. Now imagine how many of us do this actually, right? Um, we secretly hope for a problem to go away. If I don't look at it, it will simply go away or it will solve on its own. That can happen if you are in the right energy, but I wasn't. And I was avoiding it. And the energy of avoidance never helps you because it's fear, right? It's resistance. And you know the saying, what you resist persists. So I was in full fear mode and I had been avoiding the situation. And I had been hoping and praying for something to happen. to change everything around me. I wanted to be safe. And deep inside, deep inside, I thought that it was my husband who had to do the job. He had to save us. He had to step up. He had to solve the situation. So I kept waiting, and I kept waiting and waiting and waiting. And while I was waiting, without me knowing, the situation had got worse and worse and worse. And when I got that notice, I didn't even know that we owed rent. I didn't even know that it hadn't been paid because I hadn't listened to my husband. But when I got that paper, when I had that paper in my hand, now that I look at it in hindsight, I can see what an amazing, what a wonderful blessing that paper was for me. Because that paper was my passport. That paper was the passport for an entirely new life. The life that I am living right now. Because you see, up until that moment, I didn't know who I really was. I felt so small and so powerless. And I was convinced that there was nothing that I could do. I had my babies, I had my children. I had my business, but I was making very little money through my business. My excuse was, of course, I have to look after the kids, right? That was an excuse. That was me playing small. So when I had that paper in my hands, I realized that I couldn't continue to play small, that I had to do things entirely differently. And that was the moment when I woke up. That was the moment when I decided to stop waiting. That was the moment when I decided that I would change things. It was going to be me. I couldn't continue waiting anymore for things to change on their own, for a miracle to happen. It had to be me. It was my problem after all. So I decided to take action. But I had absolutely no clue as to how I would turn things around. However, that amazing machinery in the unseen had started to work. And a few days later, I received the nudge to contact a mentor. She was somebody that I knew very closely, and we had conversations before. But for the first time, I considered hiring her as my mentor. I had never had a mentor before. I had built my business following the advice from courses, from online courses, and from free stuff. And I was making some money. Of course, it wasn't enough. So I knew that I needed help. And that was the first thing I did. I sought for help. And I talked to this person. And this person agreed to offer me a longer payment plan to enter one of our coaching programs. And that payment plan made things a little easier for me, although I had absolutely no idea how I was going to pay that, because it was, for me at the time, it was an incredible amount of money. I had never paid that much money before. And I hadn't even had that much money. But this was for me like, life or death. I just had to solve this. So I decided to trust, because for me, it was the only thing that I could do. And when I talked to this mentor, I only had 50 euros in my PayPal account. I remember vividly that I talked to her. It was nighttime, my time, not her time. It was nighttime, my time. And everybody was sleeping at home. And I vividly remember my hand on my mouth trembling. It didn't stop trembling when I clicked the button to send her those 50 euros to secure my spot in her program. I had absolutely no clue how the rest of the money would show up. But I trusted. And I had the feeling when I clicked that button, I had the feeling of jumping down a cliff, no parachute, just, free fall. And an image came to mind from the amazing book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And she talks about this image, like jumping off a cliff. You, um, you can't see the net, but the net will appear. The trick is that you have to jump anyway, because you don't see the net until you jump. And that's what I did. I saw no net, but I jumped anyway, and the net appeared. 2 months later, I had reached my goal of doubling my income. A few months later, I had tripled it. And at the end of the year, I had multiplied it by 5. They were incredible results. And they happened because I just couldn't afford not to, not to make them happen. I just couldn't. It was, for me, it was a matter of life or death. There was no possibility of failure, because failure meant my family would lose a roof over their head. So that was not a possibility for me. From that day on, everything has changed in my life, because what that taught me was that I am capable. I can do this. I had no idea of what I could do until I just had to do it. And this is what happens, and this is the magic of the lowest point. This is the magic of the lowest point. We all get the situations in our life when, we reach our lowest points, we reach rock bottom. And the gift of the situations is that these situations teach us what we are really and truly capable of. Until you are obliged to jump off the cliff, you don't know that you can fly. You see? That was my experience. I had no idea what I was capable of. I had no idea about what I was able to do. And so, not only did I save my family from that situation, not only did I turn that situation around, but I also received a very, very magical gift. The gift of me. The gift of getting to know me, the real me, the powerful me, getting to know who I really was. And that was magic. Because once I knew who I really was, a world of possibilities opened up in front of me. I had never, ever even thought that I would be capable of building the business that I have right now. I had never, ever thought that I would become my family's breadwinner, and that my business would pay for everything in my family. That's what happened for several years. But there was another magical, very magical gift. And it was the minute that I decided not to be a victim of circumstances anymore, the minute that I decided to take back my power and to change things for myself, as my identity started to shift and change, and as I started to become the woman who was capable of turning things around, my relationship with my husband changed dramatically. Because up until that moment, he had been trying to talk to me. He had been trying to he wanted a partner. Of course, he wanted a partner, but he couldn't find one. All that he found was a child, another small child, a scared little girl hiding her head in the sand. So, of course, that it was not an equal relationship. Okay, it was like an adult-child relationship. As I became the adult, all the dynamics of our relationship had to change. And it was very and it wasn't easy. It was actually very difficult the first few months, as I was merging into a new version of myself, as I was becoming who I would be. My husband started to not know me, and instead of growing together, for the first few months we grew apart. But even that was a gift, because it prepared us for what was going to come afterwards. And the real gift was that when I could see myself as I really was, when I could see who I actually was, um, I could relate to my husband in a very different way, as equals. And that started to heal our relationship. Of course, he put in a lot of work as well, just decided. But the the real gift is that nowadays we have a very, very different relationship. We are really, really close, and it's amazing. So what I want you to take from this conversation is that we all have these low points in our lives. We all have these very, very low points. For me, the lowest point was the possibility of being evicted from my home having two kids. Because when you have kids, I mean, if I had been alone, well, you know, I can manage, you know. But when you have kids, the responsibility, for me, that was the lowest point in my life. I felt like such a failure. But having had that opportunity, the opportunity to change my life, the opportunity to prove to myself what I am capable of doing, has also been the hugest gift I have ever received in my entire life. And of course, I have from then on, there have been other low points in my life. Other things have happened in my life that have been very, very low points. And I have come to feel the same feeling of failure again. But I remember. I remember what I did back then. I remember how I turned the situation around. And I remember how surprised I was when I saw myself in the mirror and saw the real me, the real powerful me. I remember all of that. And so, in other situations in which I have hit rock bottom again, I just had to lean on those memories. I just had to remember what I was able to do back then, and to remind myself that if I did it then, I can do it again. And that has been a huge, huge blessing. So the magic of the lowest point is that the lowest points teach us what we're capable of doing. They teach us who we really, really are. And sometimes you need this moment, right? Sometimes you need to hit rock bottom. Sometimes you need to go to your lowest point to remind yourself of your true power. But of course, it doesn't have to be that way. You can remind yourself of your true power every single day. You can be mindful of who you really are every single day. As long as you don't forget who you are, then you don't need those low moments. And that is what I have remembered from that lesson. And whenever I have hit another low point in my life, I just need to remember. Just need to remember what I did back then. I just need to remember who I really am. And just tune into that. And that brings up all the magic again. So there's an old Sufi story that goes more or less like this. There was this um, old man who lived with his son in a very small village, and this was a very, very poor man. And he decided that he wanted to be rich. He didn't want to be poor anymore. So he decided that he would buy horses, but he didn't have the money to buy horses. So he asked some of the neighbors from the village to lend him some money. And they lent him the money, and he bought a beautiful, beautiful horse. But then a storm came, and the gate of the place where he kept the horse fell down with the storm. And so the horse ran away freely. And the next day, there was no horse. And so all the villagers came to visit the man and said, "Oh, this is this is a tragedy. You lost your horse, and now you're poor again, and now you owe us all this money." And the old man simply said, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" Then the next day, the old man saw that his horse had come together with some wild horses. The gate had been mended, and the old man could guide all those horses back in. And now he could keep them safe so they couldn't run away. Now he didn't have only one horse, he had lots of them. Bad thing, good thing. So all the villagers came and told him, "Wow, this is amazing. It's such good news. Now you're a rich man. Look at all the horses that you have." And he said, "Bad thing, good thing, who knows?" And then they started to breed the horses and care for them in order to sell them. But one of the horses, when his son was tending to it, he fell off the horse and he broke his leg. And so the son had a broken leg, and he couldn't walk straight again. And all the villagers came to see him, and they said, "Oh, what a tragedy! Your son is such a handsome man, and now he can't walk. Now he's lame, and he'll never find a wife." And the old man said, "Bad thing, good thing, who knows?" And then there was a war, and all the young men from the village were called to enlist in the army. And all of them went to the army, except the son of the old man, because he couldn't. He couldn't walk well. He was lame. And so all the villagers came to see him and said, "All our sons have left, and we don't know if we will ever see them again. But you're so fortunate to have your son with you." And the man said, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" And so the story goes on and on. And what I love, love, love about this story is that things happen and we label them as good as bad. But how can we know? How can we know if they are actually good or bad? Back then, 8 years ago, when I held that eviction notice in my hand, that was a very, very, very bad thing happening for me. It was one of the most difficult things that I have ever gone through. It was very, very bad. And that's the way I labeled it back then. But now, 8 years later, when I look back, I don't see that experience as actually as a bad thing. I see it as a gift, as a blessing. So what would happen if those low moments, maybe you are living a low moment right now, or maybe it's not your lowest moment, but maybe you have difficult situations in your life, as we all have them. How about not labeling them as bad. How about keeping them open? Who knows? Good, bad, who knows? Who knows what the future will bring? I'd like to think that there is a divine order in everything, and everything that happens to us has a why. Maybe we can't see it right now, but we will see it eventually. So, my lesson was that now the things that happen to me, I don't really label them as good or bad. Who knows? I always look for the blessing inside of everything because every situation has a hidden blessing inside. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope that this talk has inspired you, and I hope that you'll download my freebie, and I will see you again in my list very soon. Thank you.
That's it for this episode. The next one is still in creation. Thanks for listening, and don't forget, if you want to support this podcast, share, subscribe, and leave stars, blue thumbs, and a review on whichever platform you listen to. If you want to be accompanied in the change processes that life offers you, if you want to live a goddess life daily and participate in the awakening of feminine energy in the world, know the secrets of witches, and apply the rituals of fairies in your daily life, contact me on my website isayabel.com. You can also subscribe to my newsletter to be informed of all the news in the real and virtual world of Isayabel. You will, of course, find this podcast on all platforms: Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, etc., but also on YouTube and on my website, isayabel.com, on the podcast page